Hey everyone, it's me, Gretchen Rubin, coming to you live from my apartment in New York City, and I am here today in a second with my co-host of the Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast, Elizabeth Kraft. And while we're waiting for Elizabeth to join us, tell us where you are in the world, because we always like to know, and let us know, did you read our book club book, David Sedaris' Me Talk Pretty One Day? It's hilarious, it's beautifully written, it's thought-provoking. Did you read it? And here's Elizabeth, and so give us a thumbs up if you read it. I can't wait to hear what people thought. Oh, someone's in Paris. How appropriate, because a big part of this happens in Paris.
Hi.
Hey. Oh, you're wearing your Onward and Upward shirt.
I am.
Wonderful. Yes. Yes, that's a good shout out for
Puts
our merch.
me in a good, huh?
That's a good shout out for our merch. If you want mugs, if you want t-shirts, if you want long sleeve t-shirts, if you want tote bags, if you want hoodies, we got them.
I will say this particular shirt is not merch. This is from Old Navy.
That's right.
But it's still a good reason to shout out merch.
It inspired us to do
yes.
That. Yes. Go to GretchenRubin.com/shop and you'll see all our merch. So Elizabeth, the day has arrived.
Yes.
Me Talk Pretty One Day. And I have to say that I don't know why, I've already said this to you like 3 times. I don't know why the phrase "is them the thoughts of cows" that he said in The Butchers just cracks me up. I just say that over and over to myself and I just laugh.
He really captures that sort of what you're saying when you speak a language badly. And it's just so funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like the fact that when he was sort of oblivious, he would just kind of free associate and kind of like have fun with it. And then when he started to try to actually speak better, that's when he froze. Because I know, we've all been in that feeling where you kind of do better as an amateur than you do when you're just trying it. Someone said the Paris metro scene cracks me up. Oh yeah, put in your favorite scene. So mine was "is them's the thoughts of cows." That was my favorite line. Put in your favorite or the title of your favorite essay. I think my favorite essay was the title essay, "Me Talk Pretty One Day," which is often the case, that the title one is the best one, or the favorite. How about you, Elizabeth?
I think mine was the euthanasia, which was about sort of periods of life being marked, in this case by pets, and sort of the sort of bitter sweetness of like the passing of time. And to me, there was something in that I really laughed out loud about, although it was so wrong, which is his mom sending him the check for his cat's cremation and putting cat burning or pet burning in the memo. It was funny. I mean, his family.
He's absurd. He kind of goes to the absurd. Oh, so here's what people say. People say explaining Easter. I like the crossword puzzle one, the one with the parents and the dogs. I love the first chapter, the Me Talk Pretty One Day. So this is interesting. A lot of people, my favorite scene was when he went to the doctor and asked Weston Brad French for the spawn in his face to be removed. Yeah. So it seems like it's like there's a lot of people have different favorites, which I think is the sign of a strong book, which is that there's a lot of good parts that can hit you differently. What's interesting too? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was just saying, I'm in the middle of Gretchen David Sedaris' masterclass on writing.
Oh, yes.
I think on writing humor. And it's really interesting. He talks about how like a funny incident doesn't make something a story. Like there has to be something bigger that turns it into a story. So he keeps very detailed diaries, very well-written diaries about his observations. And then he kind of waits to see, I mean, this is my interpretation, to see if somehow they become something bigger.
Yeah.
Which is just fascinating to me.
Well, it's interesting because Philip Pullman, who wrote the His Dark Materials and many other books, he has a great line about that. And I can't remember it exactly, but it's something like, events are what happens. The story is like is what I tell. Because he's like, just mere narrative is not a story, because it's like you could have a conveyor belt, like things are going by on a conveyor belt, and that's so it's like, how do you craft something into a story? That's interesting. And is it a good course? Is it?
Oh yeah. Well, I just love watching him and listening to him. Okay, here's a question, because as anyone who's been watching this Insta Live knows, I very much wanted you to listen to it. You did not want to listen to it, but you said you would try to listen to a piece. Did you listen to anything?
Yes, I did. Because if you go online, you can listen to a clip of it. And I had heard one time when we were going to drive Eleanor up to summer camp, we listened to, I had forgotten this, but we had listened to, I think, the collection that has Santa Land in it, which was kind of his one of his most famous pieces. And so I remembered his voice, and then I was like, oh, and then I kind of remembered about his family and stuff. So I thought I had never read anything by David Sedaris, but I had listened to that a long time ago. So once I started listening, I was like, oh yeah, no, I do remember his voice. He just does have a very, very interesting, unique voice. And so does Amy Sedaris. Anybody listens to Homecoming, she also has a very interesting, powerful voice.
And another thing that's interesting in the audio, and someone just mentioned that in the comments, is that a lot of the audio is in front of a live audience. So it's not just him in a studio. Well, and that adds a lot.
Well, that makes sense because, he's famous in the book world for having these book events that are just go on for hours and that are really productions, and he really engages with the audience. So I bet his humor, it really feeds off of performance. I mean, this is one of these things we're seeing right now is all these performers who usually perform in front of a live audience. They are really struggling to deal with the fact that they don't have people responding to them. So I think that makes perfect sense that he would have wanted to record it under those conditions.
And I saw him once at UCLA, and it was fantastic. I could have listened to another 2 hours of him reading stuff.
Yeah, someone said, I listened to him reading his audiobook, Theft by Finding, Diaries 1977 to 2002. Hilarious. Definitely the way to read his work. Complete with singing. There you go.
And he does voices. I mean, that's the thing. He does his dad and his mom, and I mean, everyone in his family. And some of them have strong accents, so he does their accent. I mean,
what is it? What is the rooster? His brother?
Yes.
Somebody said, yes, I've been to an event of his, got to meet him afterward. Yeah, give us a thumbs up if you've seen him live, because I think a lot of people have seen him. Yeah, I mean, I've heard booksellers have told me tales of people just get into it. Like they know that's what's coming and it's part of the fun. It's a real party.
One thing that was interesting to me about the book, Gretch, is that he talks in his diaries. He talks about how he doesn't like to write about emotion. And yet the stories are often very emotional. You feel how much he loves various family members and his partner, and you really, I mean, I thought the story with Mr. Mancini, his guitar teacher, it's very emotional, and like what he went through being gay in that time, in that part of the world, really comes through, even though he never sort of makes it about that.
Yeah, I think he uses the humor and the absurdity to kind of lighten the tone, even though he's often dealing with very, very heavy subjects. If you're just joining, I'm Gretchen Rubin. This is Alyssa with Craft. We are the hosts of the Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast. And today we are talking about our book club choice, which is David Sedaris's Me Talk Pretty One Day. Write in the comments, did you read it or did you listen to it? Because Alyssa, you definitely made an excellent case for listening to it. So I think anyone inclined to audiobooks probably, someone says dark humor to deal with some hard emotions. Yes, and I think that might be one of the reasons that he's so popular, is that it does let you kind of go to that place, but in a way that you don't feel like you have to kind of work yourself up to it so much. Yeah, someone said Mr. Mancini's story, so sad for both of them. Yeah. Oh, look, a lot of people listened.
Yeah, there's one.
Yeah, listen. Reddit. Oh yeah, interesting. Audiobook. That is interesting. I was surprised by the cover of the book. If you didn't get the actual cover, it's like a very French, and there's no other information on the jacket. I thought this was a very bold choice. You know that a writer has made his reputation when they can pull off a jacket like this.
Yes.
This is not the book. This is not the book cover of a first-time author. But it's
yes. Someone said they like the speech therapy essay. Sad, but dark, but funny too. Yeah. And again, that was about it was interesting how there were, you know, I don't know, the association with gay children and how they talk and that whole thing, and how you had to like the team, and if you didn't like a team, you were suspect.
And he
which,
had
of course,
to guess.
you and I would appreciate as being people who don't care about teams.
We don't care about teams, but he was like, I had to guess. So she was wearing red clothes. So I just decided, okay, I'm going to go all in on that one side. And terrible mistake. I have to say, one of the things that I liked about the book is there was a character named Gretchen, his sister, who's actually named Gretchen.
Yeah.
There's almost no characters named Gretchen. So it's always fun for me when it's the Gretchen. I wonder what his family thinks. I mean, certainly, like, what did she said? Like, Amy sent me a care package. It was like clams, a can of something, and then also like a book of French phrases for medical conditions, which was so clearly perfect for him. Like, you were like, this is a brother and sister who know each other so well. But I mean, his whole family, I mean, they sound like they would just kind of roll with it.
They seem very close, and I think they're all just so eccentric. I mean, it's an interesting thing of like, where's the line between like eccentricity and mental illness? I mean, they're all seem so functional. But like his dad, like, I don't know if it's all true. I think I think he takes artistic license, and I think that is a known fact.
Yes.
But the story about his dad hiding like rotten food and then eating it and eating his hat. I mean, like, that's where you go, is that eccentric, or is there something more going on? And does it even matter, you know? Whenever you're writing about actual people, it's an interesting. Somebody says, I agree, Elizabeth, definitely embellishments. I've seen discussions of that with him where people thought that he was presenting everything and it was all literally true, and it was clearly it's clear that a lot of it there's artistic license that's being taken from things. And that's interesting, though, that he keeps extensive diaries and uses that, because it is true that sometimes in your own life you don't realize that kind of a story has just happened until later. Well, and Alyssa, I always call you my sister, the sage, because I feel like you're always saying these things that are like to me are like mind-blowingly insightful, and like I'm writing them down and I'm like, I'm gonna needle point that on a pillow, and you're like, what? I didn't say anything. Like, you didn't even notice. And I'm like, scribbling down everything that you say, because you're just like dropping these pearls of wisdom. So I think sometimes you don't realize that something, like probably that French class, when he was taking it, it probably didn't seem funny at all. It just seemed like stressful, and except maybe he's got such an eye for the absurd that he sees things like that funny at the time, which would be a great gift. I also think that he elicits that in people. I mean, an interesting thing about him is that, I don't know if he does it all the time, but clearly some of the time he moves through the world to have real conversations with people that, you know, you wouldn't normally engage. Like, you don't normally, if you're checking out at the grocery store, get into a long conversation about something. But he does that in order to get these stories from people.
Well, and didn't you tell me that that's part of also, like, when he does book events, it's like he's really talking to people because he's using kind of that as a way to feed his imagination. Somebody says, hey, I live in the South, and you wouldn't believe the characters in my small town. Well, somebody says, what's the discussion about? We're talking about David Sedaris' Me Talk Pretty One Day. I'm Gretchen Rubin. This is Elizabeth Kraft. We're the hosts of the Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast. Well, it's funny because when I was in college, one of my college roommates was like from Northern California, from Bolinas, which is like kind of a very well-known town. It's like super eccentric and like super crunchy and, you know, very artistic and edgy, blah, blah, blah. And then I would tell her like little stories of things that happened in Kansas City where we grew up. And one day she said to me, she goes, the stuff that happened in Kansas City is way wilder than anything that ever happened in Bolinas, California. I was like, really? I think every town has its characters and has its stories.
You're used to whatever you grew up with so to her, you know, people I don't know what happened, but probably a lot of nudity and pot smoking, I imagine.
Yeah, somebody says the 2020 grads will have a good story to tell. Well, that is true. So Alyssa, you've read other books by him. If somebody wanted to read more, what's the name of the collection that Santa Land is in? Because I think that was the one that sort of made his reputation.
I don't remember.
Does anybody know? Put it in the comments if you know.
His latest book, or one of his latest books, which I just read, is called Calypso. And it's really interesting because, and someone just said in the comments, one of his sisters committed suicide. And I believe that's his sister, Tiffany. And there's a lot about that in the book, which is interesting because is that he's moving through time in these books. So all of these relationships within his family or what's happening with his family, you're sort of in on. Santa Land Diaries, someone says.
Thank you. Or Holidays on Ice, yeah.
And so now he's at a different phase of life, and his father is obviously much older now, and his family is dealing with this tragedy. And so it's just interesting because you feel like you know them and care about them to then hear this. And again, how they always find, though, humor in all of this, you know?
Yeah. So how many people who read this like memoirs? Because Alyssa, you and I love memoirs, and so this is kind of memoir. Give us a thumbs up if you like memoirs. I had a funny experience, which is, so I met somebody who joined my Kidlit group who was great, and she had written 3 memoirs. And whenever I meet somebody who's written a memoir, I immediately want to read their memoir. But like by weird quirks of like going to the library and getting mixed up and whatever, I ended up reading her memoirs backwards. And that was a crazy experience because the dramatic irony of me knowing how things would turn out when the author of the book did not know how it was going to turn out just added this kind of level of poignant, and it was a really interesting way to do it. And I wonder if with David Sedaris, again, like if you read them backwards or you read them forwards, you would have a very, very different kind of impression of his writing and his character and of like kind of the development of the characters. It's interesting. A lot of thumbs up. Someone says, I love memoirs, one of my favorite genres. Well, and I also, this is funny writing, humor writing, which I think there's not nearly enough of. I love humor writing. Like I love the work of AJ Jacobs, who's also a friend of mine. He's hilarious, very dry, a lot of information. But I mean, his book, what's the one about the
Year of Living Biblically?
Well, that's funny. That's very funny. The encyclopedia one. What's the encyclopedia one called? Oh, like not The Man Who Knew Everything.
Oh, right. I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
Oh, I read I Miss You When I Blink. I read that book. Oh, I love AJ Jacobs. Okay, if you like AJ Jacobs, so The Know-It-All. The Know-It-All. One man's quest to read the entire Encyclopedia Britannica, which he did. But I mean, I'm like that. It's like laugh out loud funny about what he read in the Encyclopedia Britannica. So if anybody has, drop names somebody's mentioning. Jen Lancaster, also funny. Yeah, put them in the comments because I'm always looking for, one book that I read recently that was quite funny is Wow, No Thank You. This is getting a lot of attention right now. And she's written a couple books of essays, which I'm excited to go back.
But you won't be surprised. Someone recently asked me if we would like one of their hamsters, and my response was, "Yikes! No, thank you."
No, yes. Wow, no, thank you. Yes, and there's a big rabbit there. Danny Wallace is hilarious. I've never heard of Danny Wallace. That's great. Someone says, I'm not a huge fan of memoirs. I can't understand how people can remember so much, especially of their early days. Does everyone just keep very detailed diaries in case they write a memoir? Well, it's interesting. I've talked to a lot of people, and I mean, I write memoir, a kind of memoir myself. And it's an interesting process about like what you retrieve and how. I don't remember my childhood at all.
Yeah, your memoir is very like of the present. I mean, it's things that have just happened.
Yes, I don't write about things in the distant past. No, that's.
I wouldn't be able to write a memoir, even about like my time in Hollywood. I don't think.
Well, it's interesting because Amber Shares is a friend of both of ours who wrote The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants and many other great books. And I was saying to her, how are you so in touch with like those feelings? And she's like, I remember everything. I remember the way I felt and my thoughts and what I did and what a day was like. And I was like, gosh, I just so envy that. I feel like it's very, or like when my daughters were little, I'm like, what was it like to have a baby in a crib? Like, what was that like? What was the pattern of our day? And it's very hard for me to even retrieve something like that, which is not that long ago.
And as a lot of people are talking about diaries, an interesting thing also, point David Sedaris makes about keeping diaries is that you don't know, usually when you meet someone who's going to be very important in your life, you don't know it. So he's like, it's interesting to see someone who he might have just mentioned in passing in, you know, his diary, who then turned out to be his editor and someone he has a very deep relationship with. But, you know, it was like a handshake at a restaurant, you know?
Yeah.
And then also people who are so important to you at a time who you then never talk to again, you know, once you've left that town or whatever.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting. His boyfriend, Hugh, I loved how the story about Hugh, where he met him and said, "You will be mine." Like, to not to Hugh, but like as he was leaving, walking down the street, he looked at his building and said, "You will be mine."
Yes. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. No, what is it? Hugh said, well, like after the whole Mensa thing, he's like, what am I good at? And he said something like, you're good at naming stuffed animals and vacuuming or something like that. And he's like, I think I can think of more if you give me more time. And I was like, naming stuffed animals. Wow. That is specific, you know?
That's funny.
No, someone says sometimes having a great memory can be a curse. Oh, that's true. People consult family members for help remembering. Yes, that's very true.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people will look at their family members' diaries even to get pieces if there was some big event.
Yeah. If you're just joining, I'm Gretchen Rubin. This is Elizabeth Kraft. We're talking, and we host the Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast. And we're talking about Me Talk Pretty One Day, which was our book club pick for the Instagram. And we should mention that if you are a happier listener and you listen to the book club that we have on the Happier podcast, the book that we will be discussing in July is The Dutch House by Ann Patchett. If you've read The Dutch House, like, put a thumbs up in the comments to encourage other people to read it. It's so good.
So good.
And we'll be talking to Ann Patchett. And if you're going to order the book, she co-founded the beloved Nashville indie Parnassus. So if you're going to order it, you might consider ordering it from Parnassus for, you know, Ann Patchett, or from your own local indie.
Someone says Hugh's mother lives in Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, really?
Does readings at local bookstores. Huh? What?
Oh, you're freezing.
Oh,
now you're back. You were freezing.
Sorry.
Now you're back. Someone says Ann Patchett is awesome. Yeah, she is. Wait, can I hear you? Are you talking?
Yeah, I can hear. I'm sorry. I was not sure if I was frozen or not.
No, now you're unfrozen.
I'm good. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because a theme that kind of ties both of these books together, and is maybe part of what drew us to them, Alyssa, is that they're a lot about siblings, close sibling relationships.
Yeah.
One is very quirky, the other is less quirky, though it's deeply, you know, idiosyncratic the way everyone is idiosyncratic. But they both are about like families coming together in love with siblings. Yeah. Which, when Eleanor and I rewatched Game of Thrones, I realized that's part of what I loved about Game of Thrones. Was a
lot of sibling relationships.
Yeah, yeah.
Gretchen, someone asked, which I think is a really good question, because someone asked how you remember so many quotes, like from The Office or from books, because you have an amazing memory for quotes, but it's true, you don't remember things that happen in life.
I know, it's just weird. It's like, I remember things that I read much better than things that actually happen to me. And part of that is because I keep gigantic troves of quotations. And I reread a lot of things. So if I really love something, I might reread it many, many times. But it is true that I do remember quotations a lot. And in fact, whenever I write a book, I have to go through at least twice and take out a layer of quotations because it's too choking and annoying. I just put in so many quotations and it's always very heartbreaking for me to leave them on the cutting room floor, which is why I love my Moment of Happiness newsletter, because I always know, even if I can't find another place for a quotation that I love, I can put it in the Moment of Happiness newsletter, which is my daily quotation newsletter. Which if you want to sign up for that, it's at gretchenrubin.com/newsletter. I guess it's just the way my memory works. But I wish I remembered my own life better.
Gretch, someone's asking me why my computer's on in the background. It's actually TV, which I didn't realize was on until I saw it. So I'm trying to use my hand.
Well, that's okay. Well, we hope that everybody enjoyed David Sedaris's Me Talk Pretty One Day. I thought I had never read anything by him, but then I realized I had, but I was so glad to, someone says, I highly recommend Ann Patchett's collection of nonfiction essays called This is the Story of a Happy Marriage. I highly recommend that too. And her memoir, Truth and Beauty, and especially her memoirs, Bel Canto and Commonwealth. Those are my two other favorites, though I've read them all. But we're going to announce our next Instagram live book club, which I guess, Alyssa, we should stick to our pattern and discuss it on July 21st, because we seem to be doing this on the 21st. I don't even know what day of the week that is. Because now I'm coming on Tuesday to talk to a guest, and then we're going to do these on Friday to do Ask Us Anything. So we'll be here tomorrow at 4. But very excited. The next book is called, it rhymes, so I want to make sure I get it right. Broken Places and Outer Spaces. This is a very short memoir, very short, very powerful, very thought-provoking. Alyssa, did you find your copy? We both read it.
I have not found my copy. No, I was searching and I did not find it. So I don't have it to hold up.
I lent my copy. I have a friend who loves fantasy and science fiction as much as I did. And so the author of Broken Places and Outer Spaces is Nnedi Okorafor, Okorafor, Nnedi Okorafor. And I found Nnedi Okorafor because I loved her book, Akata Witch, and then the sequel, Akata Warrior. So I had read these, which are YA fantasy, which I loved. Then I got into the Binti books. She's written, so those are adult sci-fi, and she's won tons of awards in kind of science fiction, fantasy, both for her YA work and her adult work. But unfortunately, my friend Elizabeth likes fantasy as much as I do, so I lent her all the Binti books and my copy of Broken Places, Outer Spaces. So she's mailing, and unfortunately, it's a very small book, so she's just going to stick it in the mail and mail it back to me.
Yeah, and I'm trying to find mine. I'm sure it's somewhere, but I keep my books in no particular order, so I have to literally look through every book and find it.
I think people are really going to like it. It's published by TED, which is interesting. And she talks about a surgery that she had and sort of what the consequences of it were. How she turned to writing, why she writes what she writes. It's very thoughtful. It's a really absorbing read. It completely sweeps you up. I mean, I think, we were talking the other day about how we love a same day book, which is a book where you really just want to sit down and read and just read all day long. It was definitely a same day book for me. So again, it's called Broken Places and Outer Spaces by Nnedi Okorafor. And if you love Nnedi Okorafor's work, you are in luck, because she has written a lot of books that people love. And so it's one of these, I love it when you find a new author and then you're like, oh my gosh, it's not just one book. It's the same thing, Ann Patchett, David Sedaris. You can keep going.
Yes, I am wondering just quickly if people think they'll read more David Sedaris books now that they've read Me Talk Pretty One Day. I think I've read almost all of his books. I just started his Diaries that someone mentioned.
Oh, someone says June 21st or July 21st. I forgot. We're not even in June yet. June 21st. Thank you. So give us a thumbs up if you're going to read more David Sedaris. Oh, can you please spell her last name? But it's backwards, right? It's Okorafor, Okorafor. or you can just Google the name of the book, which is Broken Places and Outer Spaces. See, I wrote a book, Outer Order, Inner Calm, and people are constantly like swapping up the adjectives and the nouns. So I want to like make sure Broken Places, Outer Spaces. Someone says, yes, I will be happy to give more of David's books a try. Corifor, thank you, yes, for typing it in so people can see that. Yes, now I want to read all of David Sedaris's books. Well, Elizabeth, is there kind of a next one? If somebody wants to go to the second, what's your next?
I mean,
they all have such great titles.
Yeah, somebody mentioned Holidays on Ice, which I think is great. That's a great one. Yeah, I would read some of the earlier ones before maybe reading Calypso, just because it is nice to have this sort of know more about his life before reading the most recent.
Right, because you're more invested in understanding what happened. Yeah. Someone says Calypso is awesome. Yeah. Well, now I want to read Calypso too.
It's great.
It's funny because I also want to read the book Circe, so I have these names in my head and I keep so many books all the time. Okay, everyone. Well, we will be back tomorrow to do an Ask Us Anything. Oh, and someone says, and go see him live. Yes. I think if you have the opportunity to go see, listen, maybe that'll be a good sisterly adventure for us. Like once people are starting to do live events again. That would be fun. We could go see David Sedaris.
I would love to do that.
I
don't think we'll wait in line for 6 hours, but to talk to him afterward, but we'll go to the event.
We could go to the event. Yes. Yeah. I can't stay up that late, but I could go to an event. So we'll be back here tomorrow at 4. Remember that the book for June 21st, thank you for attentive listener, is Broken Places and Outer Spaces, which is a short memoir by the author Nnedi Okorafor. And we'll see you tomorrow. And in the meantime, let's keep our hands clean and our minds clear. Bye.
Bye.